Агентством АШРС мій університет працює давно. Ми працювали в двох проєктах Erasmus з Франсуа Пернє, з Соланж Пізан. Ми акредитували PhD-програму з економіки в агентстві. Тобто у нас вже є такий стійкий зв'язок, і ми дуже приємно бачити Софі зараз. І я знаю, що Софі дуже тісно співпрацює з нашим агентством, з секретаріатом, з заступниками. Тобто вона обізнана, чим ми займаємось і яким чином ми проводимо свою діяльність. Але спочатку, е, чи бачите ви мій екран?
Так, все нормально бачимо.
Я би хотіла дуже коротко поділитися своїм досвідом роботи в групі Європейської асоціації університетів. Це минулого року ми рік вивчали, яким чином має відбуватися викладання і навчання під час криз. Бо ця ситуація стосується не тільки України. Багато університетів, європейських університетів опиняються в ситуації кризи. Що робити в такому випадку? Яким чином здійснювати викладання, навчання? Чи є в університетах плани, як поводитись в умовах кризових ситуацій? В рамках нашої групи ми зробили таку класифікацію кризових ситуацій, і ми можемо побачити, що українська вища освіта опиняється в багатьох кризах. І в економічній кризі, в соціальній кризі, в інфраструктурних кризах, і це не один раз. Це, звичайно, що воєнний стан, і це психологічний стани, які пов'язані зараз з психологічною кризою. Що ми вивчали і яким чином діяти, викладати, навчати, продовжувати освітню діяльність в умовах кризи? Ми вивчали, які механізми чи має, по-перше, заклад вищої освіти план кризового управління. І навіть серед 8 європейських університетів не всі мали такі плани. Тобто, що такі плани передбачають? Хто що має робити, які зони відповідальності, і що має здійснюватись, якщо ця криза настає, щоб учасники освітнього процесу, студенти, викладачі, адміністративний персонал, керівництво університету та стейкхолдери знали, як співпрацювати, що робити. Далі ми вивчали, які дії здійснив університет на початку кризи і наскільки заклад готовий забезпечити безперервне навчання у кризі. Було нами виявлено, що дуже важливо мати такі плани, особливо по відношенню до того, яким чином ми маємо комунікувати зі студентами. І студенти, я сама з Харкова. Вибачте, я не представилась, я є членом Національного агентства із забезпечення якості вищої освіти. Я також професор кафедри інформаційних систем Харківського національного економічного університету імені Семена Кузнеця, і я є членом національної команди експертів з реформування вищої освіти. І я, коли говорю про студентів, ви розумієте, що в Харкові це питання було дуже гостре, тому що в перші години війни у нас були студенти, і це були ще канікули. Студенти опинилися на окупованих територіях, у нас велика кількість іноземних студентів, і треба було вирішувати, яким чином допомогти їм покинути країну. Це були наші студенти, деякі залишались в Харкові під обстрілами, деякі перемістилися як в межах України, так і за кордон. Також всі були в стані шоку, в стані психологічного навантаження, також треба було таким же чином працювати із викладачами. Е, Тобто дуже важливо мати такі механізми підтримки і думати в першу чергу, звичайно, про людський капітал, про людей, але ми маємо і підтримувати це. Чим? По-перше, це цифрова інфраструктура. Не завжди буде доступ під час криз до навчальних ресурсів. Тому цифрова інфраструктура, яку, я думаю, всі університети мали розвинути, підтримувати під час ще пандемії, вона мала зіграти важливу роль. Комунікаційні засоби, інтернет. В Харкові нам дуже допомогли IT-компанії, які на другий же день запропонували користуватися старлінками компаній, які вони закупили. Також вони допомогли зберегти і проплатили на Amazon сховища, в яких ми змогли зберегти свої дані. Але це вже було в авральному режимі під час кризи. Тобто це аспекти, про які треба думати, мати плани, і всі мають знати, хто за що відповідає. Важливим аспектом, про це наголошували наші партнери, є тренінги для всіх учасників освітнього процесу саме з того, що треба робити, які дії мають бути під час тієї чи іншої кризової ситуації. Отже, що треба робити? На що треба спрямовувати зусилля? Мати цей і постійно оновлювати цей план дій під час кризи, проводити навчання, мати якісь резервні плани розподілу ресурсів і зрозуміти, чи зможе витримати і як треба удосконалити технічну інфраструктуру. Отже, звичайно, що якість навчання в такій ситуації можлива лише за умови системної взаємодії, гнучкості, підтримки. І тут є такі настанови, поради, про що має подумати університет і саме викладачі. Обов'язково треба звернути увагу на партнерство, бо і міська рада, і партнери з бізнесу всі мають працювати разом, коли такі кризи мають місце в нашій країні. І серед таких вразливих груп, як наші студенти, викладачі, коли нам треба все ж таки підтримувати інфраструктуру і працювати. Я хочу сказати, що на першому слайді я маю посилання на це дослідження, і презентацію я передам в Erasmus Office, і, будь ласка, користуйтеся цією презентацією. Ну, от я покажу, що тут є посилання ось на другому слайді. Тепер щодо гострого питання, яке лунало вчора, щодо системи якості вищої освіти, щодо системи акредитації. Я хочу просто ці слайди, які характеризують стан системи вищої освіти, і ви бачите, що ми маємо десь 24 тисячі освітніх програм. Це дуже велика кількість освітніх програм. І ось останнім часом, наприклад, ми аналізували по галузі автоматика і приладобудування. В одному місті українському є 12 університетів, які готують за цією спеціальністю, і в них на освітніх програмах по 3-5 студентів. Тобто ви розумієте, яке навантаження це має на університети, і скільки викладачів, які відповідають ліцензійним умовам, затвердженим Міністерством освіти і науки, вони мають виконувати. І яка має бути кількість таких викладачів? У нас велика кількість здобувачів і науково-педагогічних працівників. різних університетів, різних рівнів е, навчання. Тобто це ми, це наші колеги, із цих науково-педагогічних працівників ми формуємо пул експертів. Що стосується акредитації освітніх програм, то ви бачили, що, нагадую, з 2019 року було акредитовано 10,5 тисяч освітніх програм, ну ще якась кількість була в 2025 році, ну нехай 12. Тобто десь половина тільки освітніх програм акредитована в Україні. Ні про яку інституційну акредитацію не може йти мова з такою кількістю акредитацій освітніх програм. Це здійснюється тоді, коли вже освітні програми пройшли не один цикл акредитації. Я хочу сказати, що, на жаль, Україна майже найостаннішою була доєднана до системи європейської саме оцінювання якості освітніх програм, що дає можливість визнавати дипломи, що це дуже важливо для української системи вищої освіти. Ми розглядаємо досвід Жана, що час?
Час.
5 хвилин, будь ласка. Ми розглядаємо досвід передових країн, таких як Нідерланди, країни такі як Данія, Норвегія. Але в них з 90-х років система акредитації, з 90-х, про що ми кажемо, люди? Тобто ми ще маємо навчитися. І навіть зараз ми бачимо, що не всі викладачі і не всі керівники розуміють, що таке стандарти. Стандарти – це мінімалка. Мінімальні вимоги, яким має слідувати університет. Методичні комісії Міністерства освіти і науки розробили стандарти. І, наприклад, якщо написано, що для інженерних спеціальностей деяких стандартів практика має бути 30 годин, то вона має бути 30 годин. Яка може бути в цьому питанні гнучкість? Ми маємо це виконувати. Щодо пулу експертів, ми про це говорили, що у нас є ось такий пул, десь більше 4 тисяч науково-педагогічних працівників, є постійна система тренінгів, роз'яснення, як працює система, яким чином здійснюється програма акредитації, і ви бачите, що було проведено більше 100 тренінгів. Всі матеріали для експертів є у відкритому доступі онлайн. Також хочу сказати, що більш прозорої і відкритої роботи агентства забезпечення якості освіти немає на європейському просторі. Вся наша база даних відкрита. Ви можете подивитися, які програми, як акредитувалися, як вони описані, які до них були запитання і які висновки експертів. І наша трьохступенева система, вона все ж таки спрямована на те, щоб було якнайбільш об'єктивне вивчення стану справ саме по певним освітнім програмам. Що стосується акредитації в умовах воєнного стану, ви бачите, що ми проводимо акредитації онлайн. Зараз дуже, Жанна, я бачу 2 хвилини.
Просто 5 вже пройшли.
Я хочу сказати, що зараз це небезпечно дуже, навіть в різних містах ви бачите, що непередбачувані атаки йдуть і на захід України, і на центральну частину України, вже не говорячи про Запоріжжя, Одесу, Харків, які постійно знаходяться під обстрілами. Але хочу сказати вам такий кейс, що експерти з західних областей України, вони кажуть, що ми не поїдемо в Київ на акредитацію, тому що це небезпечно. Тобто ми маємо враховувати в умовах війни і такі аспекти. Що стосується того, як працює агентство, у нас є постійна система аналізу. Ми маємо кожного місяця засідання Національного агентства, дві погоджувальні ради, тобто ми вивчаємо дуже ретельно акредитаційні справи. Всі засідання Національного агентства транслюються, і це виключення, ніде в світі такого не відбувається. Ми відкрито комунікуємо до наших закладів освіти, і всі можуть висловити свою думку ще раз. Незважаючи на те, що в систему вони можуть звертатися і додавати свої матеріали, і аналізувати, і засідання галузевої експертної ради, це відбувається. Далі, про проблеми, те, що говорили сьогодні. Чомусь вважається, що в проблемах університету в якості викладання і навчання, за які відповідають саме університети, це їх прямий обов'язок, то це має бути гнучкість Національного агентства із забезпечення якості вищої освіти. Далі я не дуже люблю оцю риторику до провідних університетів. Тобто, що таке провідний університет? Університет з гарною історією, університет, в якого одна освітня програма з фізики є блискучою, а на програмі з педагогіки немає викладачів і не забезпечуються умови стандарту. І яка гнучкість, до яких освітніх програм і до чого має бути застосовуватись, і яким чином враховуватись провідність цього університету. І мені дуже не хотілося про це говорити, але все ж таки, щоб для вашого розуміння, які проблеми ми бачимо, і з якими ми стикаємося, і нам дуже прикро, що це відбувається в університетах. От з вашої точки зору, ми академічна спільнота, ми говоримо про академічну доброчесність. Але якщо викладачі і в провідних університетах змінюють дати публікації для того, щоб відповідати ліцензійним вимогам, це порушення академічної доброчесності. Чому викладачі провідних університетів, які працюють ще в інших університетах, ми бачимо в репозитаріях роботи випускові абсолютно однакові з різними прізвищами студентів в двох університетах? Чому використовують в 2025 році джерела країни-агресора та програмне забезпечення країни-агресора? Що з цим робити? Закривати ці програми, давати умовну акредитацію? Що, якщо ігноруються оці стандарти і мінімальні вимоги? Якщо університети не мають системи цифрового документообігу, не мають системи Learning Management System для того, щоб розміщувати і виконувати цей напрям студентоцентрованого навчання, цифрові освітні матеріали. Скільки університетів мають інклюзивні матеріали, які можуть вивчатися студентами в зручний час і в зручному форматі? Тобто багато дуже питань, але за все в першу чергу несуть відповідальність університети. Далі, Національне агентство працює над удосконаленням своєї діяльності. Що стосується міждисциплінарних програм, ще з 2021 року є положення про акредитацію міждисциплінарних програм, але ви знаєте, що воно має пройти певну процедуру затвердження, і в ЄДЕБО можливість заносити інформацію про бакалаврські міждисциплінарні програми з'явилась тільки в травні. То як має швидко відреагувати Національне агентство із забезпечення якості вищої освіти? Що стосується інституційних акредитацій, вже є такий досвід і пілотний проєкт в деяких університетах, тобто готуються агентства. Але щоб ви розуміли, колеги, інституційна акредитація – це не 3 дні, як акредитація освітніх програм. Це рік або більше університет втягнутий в процедуру акредитації. І далі в більшості європейських закладів вищої освіти інституційна акредитація вона проводиться силами при наявності інституційної акредитації. Акредитація освітніх програм проводиться силами університету, але остаточне рішення все одно приймає агентство. Багато дискусій, і це
Ірін, я змушена перервати, просто повністю вже програма змінилася. Пані Софія має виступати. 21 хвилину виступ уже.
ну, трошки менше. Колеги, останнє слово. В вересні ми проводимо форум. Долучайтеся всі. Пан Андрій Ставіцький, Володимир Бахрушин. Давайте поговоримо з національними експертами, зробимо круглий стіл на форумі і обговоримо наші болючі питання. Дякую за увагу.
Дуже дякую, пані Ірина, що ви змогли долучитися сьогодні. Дуже цікава, дуже корисна, я думаю, ця презентація, і будемо вдячні, якщо дозволите нам її розмістити на сайті Erasmus Plus Office для того, щоб наші колеги, освітяни, ознайомилися. Дуже дякую. Я перепрошую у пані Софії, що у нас така зміна відбулася, але я гадаю, що дуже важливо, актуально було сьогодні почути позицію Національного агентства забезпечення якості, яке представляє Ірина Золотарьова, на відповідь вчорашніх дискусій, де вона, на жаль, не змогла виступити. Пані Софія, я ще раз перепрошую і прошу вас до виступу.
Thank you very much, Jana, and thank you very much, Irina, as well, for presenting NICAD activities in more detail. That's indeed very important, and I'm sure that it will also support the presentation I will make today. So just a reminder for everyone. So today we are diving into the topic of quality assurance to enhance teaching and learning in emergency and crisis situation. And we will discuss concrete examples, and then we will move on to a workshop format before wrapping up with key takeaways of this teaching and learning session. So just to begin with, we briefly discussed it yesterday. So in order to make a transition towards today's presentation, I wanted to go back to the risk management approach, which may be a way to switch to wartime quality assurance of teaching and learning, because it's an approach that can be seen as more suitable to conflict-affected environment, as it presents unique challenges and risks that undermine the delivery of teaching and learning. And we saw yesterday that traditional quality assurance for stable countries may not always be fit for purpose in conflict-affected areas. And in that case, having a risk-based quality assurance approach may be helpful. And as you mentioned, Irina, risk can be of academic, strategic, financial, operational, reputational, cybersecurity, and compliance nature. So you are facing lots of risks. And prioritizing these risks may be a good way for you to be sure you address them correctly through quality assurance and that you tackle the core of your issues. So if we just have a look at those three main steps when it comes to, well, quality assurance, but also risk management, of course, you always need to start by making a diagnosis of the situation with quality assurance mechanisms. And once you have a better idea of the state of play of teaching and learning in a given situation, then you can move to step 2 and try enhancing the quality of teaching and learning based on the quality assurance results, of course. And as always, step 3, you need to check on the success of the enhancements policy still with quality assurance mechanism. And if they work well, you can go on. And if they don't, you need to find some remedial actions. And so in the coming slides, I will always try to start by a diagnosis of a situation and show you some enhancement activities. So I have divided these presentations in 5 main parts that are quality assurance focus in times of emergency and crisis. So we will start by focusing on student progression. Then we will look at teaching delivery modes, then international partnerships, student and staff well-being, and we will end with post-conflict quality assurance. So let's start with student progression. I here have an example from Sudan in Africa, which is facing a significant education crisis due to the war, leading to the complete disruption and closure of about 100 public and private universities. And that's not surprising. The situation has resulted in widespread displacement of people and the destruction of higher education institutions, as you were facing as well. And in response to this disorganization and the fear that a whole generation of students' future will be lost, our researchers actually proposed innovating the role of quality assurance systems. And the proposed mechanism in that case is the cohort analysis system. We briefly mentioned it yesterday, but let's have a look at how cohort analysis can be useful. So it's a way to focus on tracking a group of students who enter the program in the same academic year over an extended period. And this longitudinal tracking observes outcomes and trends. So data is collected through this system, and it can be used to improve key performance indicators, student satisfaction, and retention rates, for example. And according to this researcher, the war in Sudan has created a perplexing situation by dividing cohorts, such as the 2019 intake, into many clusters. And according to these researchers, we have 3 main clusters, which include students who have either emigrated to study abroad, covering all costs by themselves. Second, we have students who remained in Sudan, waiting to resume studies. And third, we have some students who continued studies at regional universities or in safer areas within Sudan. And the proposed cohort analysis would therefore involve defining the cohort by their enrollment year. So for example, for the emigrated students, they took the 23-24 emigrated students cohorts. Second, they try to identify and compare the course descriptions from the universities in Sudan before they emigrated and the universities abroad in order to find some similarities. In the third step, they use this cluster analysis in order to identify subgroups within each cohort. For example, the students who emigrated versus those who relocated within Sudan. And they track their studies within these different locations. And this is needed to decide which programs align educationally, economically, and culturally with Sudanese university standards. Last step, they also want to employ sentiment analysis to gather feedback from students who have emigrated over time, correlating their sentiment with performance metric. And this information can be gathered through reviews, surveys, but also social media platforms. And what is actually important here is that we have 3 main stakeholders involved. We, of course, have the ministry in charge of higher education, which is well placed to track students who are abroad. They usually have data on students, have their contact and so on, but they also need to be in contact with higher education institutions who may also have different contacts with universities and with the students, and who can make sure to make bridges between the students when they were studying in Sudan and the student when they went abroad and studied elsewhere. And of course, the other important stakeholders, the students themselves. It's important that they are committed and involved also in trying to solving this situation, and that they answer when they are contacted by the ministry or by the higher education institution. If they don't, it will be quite hard to actually try to set up a national policy and a national system to have this cohort analysis if the students are not involved and don't take part. And this approach is also framed as a way to potentially turn the brain drain with students immigrating to other countries into a brain game by learning from international universities where students are going to study abroad and leveraging the knowledge they gain for this time being abroad and making sure they come back. So being in constant contact with the students who have immigrated abroad is also a way to Show them that you care about them, that their country is there for them at the end of the war, and that you will be able to welcome them, to value their new skills. And that's why it's also important to make sure you map the different curriculum of the countries where students have immigrated with your own national curriculum. That way, if students want to come back in your country and want to resume studies at another cycle, this will be able for you to make sure that, okay, they have gained all of the knowledge they should have gained in a bachelor's degree abroad. That's good. They can enter a master's degree here. So I had some questions for you regarding well, student progressions. I wanted to see whether you have managed since the beginning of the war to monitor maybe student progression. If so, how did it go? And a second question, I was wondering what stakeholders should be engaged in monitoring student progression in Ukraine and with what tools? I'm going to unshare my screen to see you if any of you have some comments maybe.
Софі, можете ще раз повторити запитання?
Sure. I wanted to see if you had any reaction on these student progression studies, see if you have been able so far to monitor students' progression in Ukraine since the beginning of the war, for example. Yeah, I see that Volodymyr has raised his hand. Would you like to open your mic and share your views?
Так, добрий день, шановні колеги, шановна Софія. Ну, коротенькі відповіді. По-перше, дуже цікаво було застосування методу кластерного аналізу. І оскільки я ну, займаюся такими методами, і, зокрема, питаннями аналізу даних за допомогою математичних методів, то нам було б цікаво долучитись до таких досліджень більш активно і більш предметно. А що стосується другого запитання стосовно того, як ми можемо моніторити успішність студентів і їх прогрес тих, які зараз за кордоном, то з досвіду нашого університету, Запорізька політехніка, я можу сказати, що в нас ну, насправді дуже різні є студенти. У нас є студенти, яких нам важко, можливо, моніторити, тому що вони паралельно навчаються в нас і в інших закладах. Зокрема, от буквально в мене серед випускників цього року бакалаврату є студент, який паралельно закінчив не ту саму програму, але дотичну програму в Оксфордському університеті у Великій Британії. І, безумовно, ми просто довіряємо тим результатам, які є в Оксфорді. Ну і ми бачимо, що в нього була досить цікава і ну, якісна кваліфікаційна робота. Тобто ми можемо от таке спостерігати. Також у нас є студенти, які, можливо, не за кордоном, але які дистанційно навчаються, бо в Запоріжжі переважно дистанційне навчання, хоча ми маємо певні, ну скажімо так, елементи офлайн навчання для інженерних спеціальностей. І частина наших студентів працює за спеціальністю і в Запоріжжі, і за кордоном, там, де вони зараз перебувають. І ми теж можемо бачити навіть через їх вибір курсових робіт, дипломних робіт, те, що вони дійсно чогось знають, чогось вміють, вони вже мають свою сферу зацікавленості, тобто їм цікаві певні конкретні теми в межах нашої спеціальності. І от це теж є певним засобом для моніторингу. Ну, а для студентів молодших курсів це все ж таки переважно елементи контролю через дистанційні технології, співбесіди, спілкування зі студентами, контрольні заходи і так далі. Дякую.
Ну, я понимаю, что я тоже. Не, я к тому, что
Пані
ну,
Олександре, вимкніть мікрофон.
Thank you very much, Volodymyr, for your very useful input. I see that we have someone else who raised his hand. Yuri, would you like to share your opinion as well?
Yes, thank you. I'm from medical university. That's why we have our peculiarities in the process for teaching and learning of our students. And of course, it's a very good experience from Sudan about the caring about the students who are studying abroad. And we try to support our students abroad also. And due to our features of the learning process, all our students learning like blended. I mean that they every time present at the classes. Even if they miss any class, they have to walk. That's why we have to see their progress every day, every week, and we can monitor this process in our electronic journals, in our electronic learning system, and we meet every week and more than one time per week. That's why it's not a problem for medical university.
All right, thank you very much for your feedback. We will also have another
Yeah,
example from a university,
that's
a
why.
medical university
Yeah,
later
thank
on.
you.
Okay, we have one other hand that is raised. Maybe that can be our last input for this session. Ihor?
Доброго ранку, шановні колеги. Ігор Романишин, доцент Прикарпатського, зараз Карпатського національного університету імені Василя Стефаника, який розташований на заході України в Івано-Франківській області, місто Івано-Франківськ. Я хочу дати відповідь на ті запитання, які поставила Софі, так, про моніторинг, як моніториться успішність студентів в нашому університеті, на прикладу освітньої програми, гарантом якої я є. Середня освіта, англійська мова і література. Ми за освітньою програмою здійснюємо підготовку вчителів, майбутніх вчителів іноземних мов, англійської мови, зарубіжної літератури, зокрема. Значить, на інституційному рівні, на рівні університету, у нас існує рада з якості, яка постійно відслідковує і є центр моніторингу успішності студентів, якості навчання. Так? Ці дві установи так, фактично здійснюють моніторинг, постійний моніторинг. Однак на рівні окремої освітньої програми такий моніторинг здійснюється, скажімо, на початку нового семестру в усьому університеті. Так, проводиться зріз залишкових знань, і щорічно ми можемо порівнювати, як відбувається прогрес чи регрес так, в успішності, в якості наших студентів. І також ще один такий спосіб або метод моніторингу – це під час підсумкової атестації. Також відбувається оцінювання студентів, їх відповідність досягнення результатів, програмних результатів навчання за освітньою програмою. І такий моніторинг ми також робимо порівняння з попередніми роками. Хочу зазначити, що під час війни, хоча ми і знаходимося в кризі, так, але суттєвої відмінності, скажімо, в сторону погіршення немає, не спостерігається у нашому університеті, зокрема на цій освітній програмі, грантом якої є. В межах буквально, що називається похибка, так, статистична похибка 5-6%. Такі коливання відбуваються або в сторону зростання, навіть було, як, наприклад, з попереднім роком, так, або в сторону зниження, як у нас було за результатами сесії підсумкової атестації цього року. Тому я думаю, що є і інші методи і в колег в інших університетах, є інші інструменти збору інформації, так, і моніторингу якості і успішності знань. Радий буду почути і інші способи, як це робити. Дякую.
All right, thank you very much for your feedback. That's also very useful, and I'm glad to see that some of you have already implemented cohort analysis and successfully, apparently. So let's move on to our second focus of the day, namely teaching delivery modes. And I wanted to talk about micro-credential because if we make a diagnosis, well, of course, the war has impacted teaching delivery modes, making it hard to ensure academic continuity. You were numerous yesterday to mention that you went to digital learning, and one type of digital learning may also be known as micro-credential. Just a definition that was given by UNESCO in 2022. A micro-credential is a record of a focused learning achievement, verifying what the learner knows, understands, or can do. It includes assessments based on clearly defined standards and is awarded by a trusted provider. It can be both a public provider, I mean a higher education institution, and in some cases, it can also be a private provider, I mean like a big national firm or international one. And a micro-credential has standalone value and may also contribute to or complement other micro-credentials. In other ways, they can be stackable, including through recognitions of prior learning, of course. However, that's not because it's a micro-credential that it's a wild credential. It, of course, needs to meet the standards required by relevant quality assurance. So I have here copy-pasted a little drawing from Quad for Tech, Quad for Teach, sorry, which is a Ukrainian initiative you may know, and which summarizes well what a micro-credential is. So of course it's micro, it's tiny, it's a small unit of learning. It's flexible, which can be useful in conflict-affected areas because it's customer-oriented, it's accessible, but at the same time, it's also a credential. So you should have at the end a document on the recognition of learning outcome on a guaranteed quality. And it should be recognized both by the labor market and by the higher education institution as well. But also micro-credential is a brand new term, a brand new concept that has emerged a couple of years ago. It's actually just a concept that is new because the idea of micro-credentials already existed dozens of years from now. If it's just a small unit of learning, it's not supposed to be fully online all the time. It can be also a small unit of learning in face-to-face teaching modes. And that's what we saw in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war back in the 1990s. And it's actually interesting because they had implemented what they call modular learning, where it was actually in secondary education, where the academic year in secondary education was broken into micro phases depending on security condition. It's also known as block courses and thematic units. So in other words, they had like a few weeks or a few days on a specific theme. Then they would go back to the shelters. And when the security conditions got better, they go on to another thematic unit. And they therefore had a shorter academic term, 18 weeks instead of 36. And they adapted the curricula. They had what they call an emergency curricula, integrating also university level exams, because here it's an example of a micro-credential that helped students going from secondary education to university. And that's also a way to think of teaching and learning in higher education. That's also how you can help students get into higher education. And in that case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the recognition was ensured through the link with the University of Sarajevo. So students who successfully attended secondary school with these micro-credentials could therefore enter university, which ensured continuity within their higher education pathway. So just some possible advantages of micro-credentials in crisis situations today. If we look at the fact that it is a modular short courses, it may have the advantage that learner can pause or resume based on security, especially, of course, when it's an online delivery, which was not the case in Bosnia, as it was, well, quite early in the year of the internet. But it's when it's done through an online delivery, it's, of course, also accessible in areas with damaged infrastructure. So that's also very useful. Another key feature of micro-credentials is that it's stackable. So it can, of course, enhance recognition as well, while building legally and credible qualifications over time. Last but not least, it's also a way to support for displaced professionals, so students and teachers retain continuity and employability thanks to these micro-credentials. And I saw that you have already discussed micro-credentials quite a lot with this Quet for Teach program that you have initiated in Ukraine. There was also a webinar a couple of months ago on the implementation of micro-credentials as a response to the challenges of European integration and post-war recovery. So I'm sure you know already quite a lot on the topic. But when it comes to quality assurance of micro-credential, there are some specific considerations for quality assurance of micro-credentials that were originally conceived as part of an existing program. In other words, offering individual modules that emerge from existing programs as separate micro-credentials can be an efficient way for an institution to expand access to the educational offering in a limited time, but it requires specific quality assurance because a course cannot just be split into pieces in order to create micro-credentials. There are some considerations to make sure it is still a full whole and that the course as a whole in the format of a micro-credential is still relevant. So first, you indeed need to assess the relevance of a micro-credential for a given course, because not all subjects are easily turned into a micro-credential. Second, you need to define new learning outcomes and adapt the curriculum. You also should not make any assumption on the prior knowledge and skills of the learner, which may be more diverse than a regular study program. You also need to define a clear credit volume for a micro-credential. It's usually quite small, like 5 ECTS credits. And as part of a quality assurance system, of course, you should test a new format and curriculum with your key stakeholders. And third, once you have launched the micro-credential, you can ask for learners' feedback to make sure to enhance the micro-credential. And as an overall principle, you should also make sure to align the development of your micro-credentials with an institution-wide policy on micro-credentials and their quality assurance. There are current discussions in the European higher education area regarding the quality assurance of micro-credentials, and they tend toward an institutional level approach to the quality assurance of micro-credentials. But program level approach also have some advantages. So let's look at the two. If we look at the institutional level approach, it has the advantages that it can rely on the institution's internal quality assurance system, and is even better if it has already been externally reviewed by the national agency. Being at the institutional level is also less burdensome than having to evaluate all of the micro-credentials one by one. And last but not least, it ensures alignment with the institution's strategy and policies. On the other hand, there are some advantages to have a program level approach to the quality assurance of micro-credentials. It gives you a more agile type of review that takes into account the specificity of each micro-credential. And it's also a way to account for the variability of quality from one micro-credential to another, which you may not be able to do if you just look at it at the institutional level through an overarching policy. But in both cases, whether institutional level or program level, you have the possibility to assess only a sample of micro-credentials and not all of them. That's something that is also becoming quite trendy now in the European higher education area, not only for micro-credentials, but for study programs as a whole, with more and more agencies trying to move on to a sample or a risk-based quality assurance of study program. And in the end, please keep in mind that the choice of institutional level or program level approach depend on the national framework and context, of course. Some models are more relevant in some contexts than in others. If we look at a concrete example of an agency which has developed quality assurance for micro-credentials, we will travel in Spain this time, in Catalonia, which is the region in the north east of Spain. And if we look at their standards, the standard the agency have developed for micro-credentials, it may give us a hint on what the quality of micro-credential is. So first, they focus on the program description. So the micro-credential should state the name of the university, the name of the micro-credential, the level according to the European qualifications framework, the relationship with the professional family, the number of ECTS, the mode of delivery, and offer. Second, there should be a justification for the micro-credential. We should be able to know the relevance of the programs to the labor markets and the potential of the institution to deliver the program. Third, we should look at the aims and learning outcomes of the micro-credentials. Fourth, we should make sure it has a clear access policy and support for students policy. Then we also look at the planning of the study program for the micro-credential. Therefore, we should make sure the structure of the curriculum is relevant, that there is a coherence between the intended learning outcome, and the mode of delivery is also relevant, and that the teaching and assessment activity are fit for purpose regarding the micro-credential. There are also needs for good teaching staff and good support staff for micro-credentials. Although it's a small unit of learning, you still need to make sure that they are suitable and sufficient, that you have enough people to actually make sure you can run your micro-credential properly. Same for the material resources and services, especially if it's a micro-credential that is run online. Last but not least, you should, of course, look at the expected results and monitor them, whether it's academic results, student satisfaction, or also employability. However, it's interesting to see that following several reviews of micro-credentials provided by Catalan higher education institution, the agency identified two main challenges with the quality assurance of micro-credentials. First, the adaptation of criteria and standards that were initially designed for highly regulated programs and full-time students to new programs that are smaller units of learning and that focus on employability and on students with completely different profile. So that's why it's very important to adapt the micro-credential and the quality assurance to this shorter format. That's not the same as a classic, a normal, traditional study program. Second challenge, the need to devise a more scalable procedure that allows the accreditation of programs to be undertaken in an aggregated way, so as to avoid the external assessment of each program, of each micro-credential individually. So in that case, the Catalan Agency for Quality Assurance pushes for an institutional approach to the quality assurance of micro-credentials. As there were quite a lot of discussions yesterday on digital learning, I wanted to broaden this discussion, not only on micro-credential, but also on another teaching delivery modes, so e-learning. I have mentioned yesterday the ESG, and there was a document that was developed by ENCA, the European Association of Quality Assurance Agency, in order to see how the ESG could be adapted for e-learning provision. So if we look at the first standard related to the policy for quality assurance, This report states that institutions should integrate their online teaching strategy into their overall quality assurance policy, as I was mentioning earlier. Second, regarding the standards and design and approval of programs. So design of e-learning programs should contribute to the creation of an online academic community. And that's very important because it's one of the specificities of the e-learning. You don't have an in-person community, so you should have an online one. Third, so standard on the student-centered learning, teaching and assessment. The online program should, of course, involve students and encourage online interactions through the diverse online tools and use appropriate online assessment methods with authentication, if possible, to make sure of the academic integrity. If we look at the 4 standards on student admission, progression, recognition, and certification, we need to ensure that qualifications obtained online are given the same recognition as traditional qualifications. That's also important. Otherwise, students will not go on an e-learning program if they don't feel like they have the same qualifications as if the program was on site. The 5th standard of the ESG is related to the teaching staff. And if we adapt it to e-learning provision, well, in that case, institutions should provide technological and pedagogical support to teaching staff involved in e-learning because, well, that's not natural to know how to use the e-learning tools. So there needs to be some support for the teachers to do that. The 6th standard is on the learning resources and student support. It's a way to ensure sufficient financial resources for robust, secure, and accessible virtual learning environments, which may be expensive, of course. 7, regarding information management, is just to say that although it's an e-learning provision, institutions should collect data specific to online learning for program evaluation and student support. 8, regarding public information, the institution in an e-learning provision should still publish clear, accurate, and accessible information about the online training, including the technical requirements, support, and completion, also dropout rates, in order to be sure that they are transparent and that the students have enough information before enrolling on the e-learning class. Last, regarding the continuous monitoring and periodic evaluation of programs, well, there is still a need to regularly evaluate the effectiveness of the online formats. So before we dive into the next topic, maybe we could gather some thoughts regarding your experience both on micro-credential, on digital learning, and how these tools have been maybe useful for you in the wartime. Maybe we can take 1 or 2 comments. Yeah, I see that there were some comments in the chat as well.
Шановні колеги, чи є коменти щодо мікрокваліфікації? Да, бачу.
Yeah, I
Ну,
see that 2
якщо
people are
можна.
waving their hands.
Так.
Volodymyr, I think you were first.
Добре. Якщо можна, такі коротенькі коментарі. В нас дійсно останнім часом приділяють багато уваги розвитку мікрокваліфікацій, але, на жаль, вони в нас поки поза законодавчим полем. Тобто це може бути ініціатива закладу вищої освіти стосовно впровадження таких модулів. І тут якраз виникає те питання, яке піднімали і я вчора, і сьогодні пані Ірина, стосовно гнучкості акредитаційних процедур. Тому що мікрокваліфікація – це не є такий обов'язковий компонент освітньої програми. І, відповідно, інколи у експертів виникають питання стосовно того, а чи дійсно всі студенти, незалежно від вибору той чи іншої мікрокваліфікації, будуть здобувати ті результати, які передбачені стандартом. З іншого боку, я можу сказати, що в нас в минулому році були внесені зміни до закону, які частково цю проблему вирішують. Вони її вирішують в який спосіб. Якщо освітня програма або от такий модуль мікрокваліфікаційний передбачає здобуття певної професійної кваліфікації, то він може бути складником освітньої програми, і це вже не просто рішення закладу, а це те, що дозволено і передбачено законом. На жаль, в положенні про акредитацію цього немає, тому що воно було прийнято останньою редакцією майже одночасно, тобто вони не могли врахувати ці зміни. Але я так думаю, що найближчим часом це буде враховано і в акредитації. Дякую.
So can I join the discussion? Yeah, I would like to share my experience of participating in Erasmus Plus project, which is devoted to implementing micro-credentials in Ukraine. So we study the experience of the European Union with this issue. In the project, the participants of the project are not just Ukrainian universities ready to implement, but also Albania and Chernogoria. But for Ukraine, it's very important that the participant of this project is National Qualification Agency, and now the agency have prepared the regulation of micro-credentials, and the universities have developed the internal regulations, and I'm sure that soon it will be possible to implement micro-credentials, to develop them, to implement and to recognize them. And that will be one more step which will align our quality assurance with European quality assurance, and that we will be able to give additional possibilities, opportunities. So these micro-credentials are for teachers, but we know that now in the times of war, it's very important to give this opportunity, because many people have lost their jobs, and that it's a good way for our people to find themselves in other jobs, or maybe some additional professional functions, and that is a very good example. I have participated in some programs, small programs here as micro-credentials. Some of them were from the American universities, but I haven't used them as recognized micro-credentials, of course. That was, for me, that was just a professional development course. Thank you.
All right, thank you both for sharing your view. That's indeed very rich to have your opinion on this topic. And yeah, I agree with the fact that having micro-credentials and setting them up can be quite challenging, especially when they are not fully integrated within the national qualifications frameworks. That's usually the first barrier before implementing them successfully, especially if one wants to have them fully recognized. That's also the issue we have in France. We don't manage to clearly define what a micro-credential is. So my agency cannot review them because we don't really know what we would have to review. And at the same time, universities try to develop some small courses, whether online or whether on-site in person over the summer and so on, but they don't really know how to value them. They can give some credits, but students don't know what to do with these credits because they're not fully recognized. So that's indeed a challenge, although the micro-credentials have lots of well, they are promising because they are flexible, so it allows people to upskill and reskill over the years, especially as the labor market changes, especially when suffering from unemployment, and also for students maybe to have some more specialization in some particular topic. So thank you very much for your inputs. We can now move on to our third key topic of the day, international partnerships. So in wartime, it's especially important to evaluate the relevance and use of international partnership, because we know that the war can affect your partnership opportunities. So trying to monitor them and see what partnership is actually important, useful, can be quite relevant. We do know that the conflict can have a negative impact on universities' legitimacy through social stigma related to stability, security, and quality affecting enrollment and partnership. And that's what you need to monitor. And there are three main actors that come into play to support the quest for international partnerships in times of war. So government or Ministry of Higher Education, which support institutions by clarifying legitimacy issue for international partners. So it's rather on the diplomacy side of the international partnership. The government and ministry has to reassure other countries that there is still relevance and need to have Ukrainian partners. The second main actor, of course, the higher education institutions, which can build connections with the international academic community to support academic staff and students at home. And they can also, of course, assure the quality of their internationalization. So the quality assurance agencies, which should support institutions by defining standards and indicators for institutions' internationalization. And one key indicator for international partnerships in time of war is academic solidarity. So let's have a closer look at what academic solidarity is. It's quite a complex slide, so I will try to be as clear as possible. There are several meanings and forms of academic solidarity. If we look on the right of the chart, in the narrow sense, academic solidarity is a sense of community, unity, and shared interests, shared responsibility, and mutual support in a particular academic community. When relatively small groups, students, lecturer, and administration are distinguished, we speak of fragmented solidarity. So that's when you have several small groups which do not really work all together. In that case, that's fragmented. And such solidarity can be both positive when the individual group focuses on achieving the common goal of the academic community. For example, by sharing material that is difficult to access, so students can share material to make sure that all of them have access to the same material, regardless of the situation in which they are, given that the conflicts can lead to different situations depending on the areas. But it can also lead to negative outputs when the activities of the members of this subgroup contradict or deny the goals and values of academia. However, solidarity of the entire community is also important here. And in that case, we have what we call an integral academic solidarity. That means that solidarity ties become more complex. It not only brings student, lecturer, and academic staff individually, but all of these subgroups are working together towards the achievement of the same goals. And reaching this type of solidarity is actually very important, this integral academic solidarity, because it has a power to leverage quality and higher education towards common goal. If we now look at academic solidarity in a broad sense, so on the left of the chart, this means that the academic solidarity is a unity, shared responsibility, and mutual support of society that unites individuals as well as various institutions, international or national, state or intergovernmental organizations in a given academic field. So it's rather as a diplomacy level. And such broad solidarity is also very important in a conflict-affected area, as it can be a leverage to have international support for your activities. And it's indeed, I mean, the concept of academic solidarity is indeed becoming more and more important. It was mentioned in 2024 in an international conference on quality assurance that was organized in Romania. where Francesc Pedro from UNESCO actually asked the audience whether the Quality Assurance Agency acknowledged academic solidarity as a quality indicator. And in most cases, it was not really formalized in written document. It was something people assumed they had in their head and that was supposed to be natural, but there was no formal way to speak about this academic solidarity. Just allow me to look at some examples of these types of solidarity and how we can have different indicators, both qualitative and quantitative, to look at them. So regarding the broad sense, the interinstitutional solidarity, university-to-university cooperation, we can have some qualitative indicators to look at them. So for example, checking the documents of mutual support agreements with international partner universities, if you have shared curricula, online hosting of displaced staff. You can also use pre-existing partnerships to enable remote teaching or material transfers. When it comes to the quantitative indicators, you can, of course, look at the number of active partner universities providing teaching backup, online courses, or mobility support. You can look at the number of displaced students or academics hosted via bilateral agreements. Or you can also look at the percentage of suspended programs reactivated through partnerships. When it comes to civic and global engagements, so solidarity beyond the university, as a qualitative indicator, you could look at the evidence of university-led humanitarian or psychosocial outreach, especially involving students. You can also look at activities related to documenting, analyzing, or mitigating the impact of the war on society. Last, regarding the quantitative indicator, you can look at the number of community-facing solidarity projects related to legal aid, mental health, or education for children, for example. And you can also look at the percentage of students involved in voluntary conflicts-related civic action or knowledge sharing. Let's now look at some concrete examples. First, you can make here two different diagnoses. If your former foreign partners no longer wish to support you since the war, you are therefore in a case of poor academic solidarity. And as a remedial action, you could seek partnership elsewhere, maybe through brokering partnership, for example. We will look at the example of the Council for At-Risk Academics. You could also promote formal recognition of qualifications for students and academics who want to go abroad. This has been done through various initiatives, mainly led by UNESCO. And on the opposite, if your former foreign partners are still willing to support you through alternative channels during the war, you are therefore in a situation of good academic solidarity, and that's good for you. You could still try to promote formal recognition of qualifications, but you can also work with your foreign partner to adapt your international partnership to the crisis situation by developing digital infrastructure to facilitate exchanges through e-learning platforms, for example, with more digital content and so on. So let's now look into more detail at the first case of poor academic solidarity when your foreign partners no longer wishes to support you since the war. This is what happens in Syria through the CARA program. It was indeed a brokering partnership that Syria used, which means that they used brokers such as the Council for At-Risk Academics, which can connect higher education institutions to reputable universities willing to support them in key areas and facilitate professional connections and research collaboration with international colleagues in spite of the war. So in the example of the CARA Syria program that was run between 2016 and 2024, there were English for academic purposes courses that were held. The idea was to have weekly online one-to-one tutor sessions with weekly online group of English and English-speaking practices sessions. And they gathered over 90 participants within the academic community, academic Syrian community. And that was a first step for teachers and researchers to be exposed to an international context and make sure they master English for academic purposes in order to take part in international actions. There was also a module on academic development that seek to address skills and cultural gap from a research culture to another through foundational courses. There were weekly training sessions and academic writing workshops to support this module. There were also some research incubation visits in the UK, where 29 visits of Syrian researchers in the UK were taken into account. Some were also done remotely during the pandemic, but it was supposed to be on site. Last but not least, this Cara Syria program also provided researchers with some specific grants, and there were over 80 pieces of research developed by nearly 100 Syrian researchers in the meantime. If we now look at the more positive scenario where your former partners are still willing to support you through alternative channel, we here have an example of a medical institution which tried to adapt its international partnership to the crisis situation thanks to digital tools. So in this example, we have Myanmar and Italy, which collaborated. So in 2016, before the military coup, there was already a partnership between the University of Parma in Italy and the University of Medicine I of Yangon in Myanmar to foster student exchanges and joint research in medical studies. However, in 2021, there was the military coup in Myanmar, which severely impacted higher education. And the two universities therefore adapted their partnership to create an online training program to address urgent medical needs. As regards the program design, the educational needs assessments involved 298 surveys and 10 interviews to identify the training priorities and therefore develop a full module e-learning course. Regarding the course delivery, it was done through pre-recorded high-fidelity telesimulation with multilingual support to ensure accessibility. The exams, it took the form of post-module quizzes. And if we look at the results, over 750 students participated in this online training, with significant knowledge acquisition observed, actually, given that 60% scored 8 or higher across all modules, and 8 out of 10, which is quite a positive grade. So that was all for the example of international partnerships I had. I think that time it's running, so maybe we can just have one intervention on your side if you want to share your views, to share your perspective on how your former international partners kept supporting you through the war.
Шановні колеги, ну точно ми продовжуємо реалізовувати проєкти Erasmus+. То я певна, що у вас співпраця з міжнародними партнерами, європейськими університетами точно відбувається. Бачу, Володимир Бахрушин.
Так, я можу додати, що дійсно набагато більше стало співпраці міжнародної і в межах проєктів Erasmus+, і в межах інших проєктів. Зокрема, от якщо взяти наш університет, то ми стали членами Європейської асоціації університетів, стали членами ЄУРАШі і беремо активну участь в їх заходах. І для нас це дуже корисно не тільки з погляду того, що ми отримуємо певну допомогу, консультації, але й з погляду того, що ми залучаємося до розроблення загальноєвропейських стратегій і політик у сфері вищої освіти. Зокрема, я брав за останні 3 роки участь приблизно у 10 засіданнях і онлайн, і офлайн Community of Practice у сфері Quality Assurance в Євраші. І там ретельно обговорювалися по різних блоках питання того, а якими мають бути нові європейські стандарти і рекомендації у сфері вищої освіти. Я знаю, що так само інші колеги, в тому числі наші, і знаю, що колеги з Національного агентства брали участь у аналогічних заходах і Європейської асоціації університетів, і ЕНКВА, і інших міжнародних організацій, які теж займаються зараз напрацюванням оцих європейських стандартів і рекомендацій. Також для нас дуже важливою є підтримка європейських університетів з одного боку з погляду академічної мобільності, з погляду певних пільг для участі у публікаціях, у конференціях. Але я б хотів звернути увагу ще на один аспект, це те, що ми намагаємося, і європейські партнери це вітають і йдуть на зустріч, брати участь не тільки щось отримувати, але й щось давати. І брати участь, зокрема, у тих проєктах, які вже є у європейських країнах. Зокрема, зараз з кількома університетами ми обговорюємо участь у проєктах, які стосуються так званих exclusive groups. Тобто ми частіше кажемо про inclusion, але там є також поняття exclusion. Тобто ті групи, які не долучені до освіти. І ми маємо сьогодні свої приклади таких груп, це і внутрішні переміщені особи, це ті наші військові, які через стан здоров'я, через поранення не можуть займатися тим, чим вони займалися. Їх треба долучати до освіти і потім повертати до нормального життя, і інші подібні групи. І от європейські університети дуже зацікавлені цим. Також сьогодні є, у нас технічний університет, є такий напрям, який є і в нас, і в європейських університетах. Це матеріали, які не для машинобудування, не для електроніки, а які для людини, наприклад, для протезування. І в нас є група, яка займається розробленням металевих сплавів, які призначені саме для медичних цілей. І ми маємо контакти з європейськими партнерами, які досліджують близькі проблеми і об'єднуємо зусилля в тому, щоб вирішувати ці проблеми і для наших громадян, які от знов таки ті самі військові, яким треба багато чого з погляду відновлення їх здоров'я, але так само і для інших категорій, які є не лише в нас, але є і в європейських країнах. Дякую.
Can I share my experience? Yeah. Okay, I'm yesterday I told that I'm a representative of a relocated university, Bogdan Khmelnytsky, Melitopol State Pedagogical University. Because of the war, the city was occupied. We were left without all our equipment, buildings, and for us, these partnerships became vital because they helped us to create new laboratories, to get new equipment, to have to stay up to date with innovations, with professional development for numerous our university teachers and students. The opportunities of partnerships gave not just professional development, but even to place where they can live, because most of our teachers and students left the occupied territory, and our students our teachers immersed in the European higher education area, because they found themselves in different European universities, and that's, on the one hand, that was very difficult. On the other hand, we could use it for our resilience, for our updating our study programs. That was very great, and I would like to agree. I agree with Volodymyr Bakhrushin, because it's really a win-win situation, because we also shared our experience of crisis management, of teaching at the crisis times. So I think that we have a lot of for us in 2022 we became the participants of 4 consortiums, so 4 Erasmus Plus projects for capacity building in higher education, and that was very important for us. Without those projects, I'm not sure that we could survive. Thank you.
Thank you very much both for your input. That's very valuable, and I like how you see international cooperation as a win-win situation that both parts can actually make the most out of it. I'm really sorry, colleagues, but we're running out of time, so I must close the question and comment session for that part, but later on in the workshop, you will also be able to share your inputs on the same topics as well. So I just suggest we go back to the slides and that we will listen to more feedback later on in the workshop. All right, so let's move on to student and staff well-being. If we look at student and staff well-being, there are some European considerations and key aspects that should be taken into account according to the European University Association. Regarding the community and culture aspects, well, of course, psychological safety and a safe learning and working environment is important for well-being, as well as a sense of institutional connection, belonging, the inclusivity and accessibility aspects, as well as mutual respect between all members of an institution. Good study and working relationship, of course, are very important, as well as social connection, whether online or on site. And everything that is linked to the connections between governance and people and the communications between colleagues and managers come into play as well. As regards the policies and practices, it's important to ensure the work-life balance, to have a well-being among staff and students, but also to manage the workloads, to make sure there is a recognition and reward system for the staff who is working well. Make sure you also have some flexibility maybe in the studying and working arrangements. You can also make sure you co-create and you collaborate when elaborating your policy, when elaborating your program. That's also a way to make sure that stakeholders feel involved in the program. If we now look at the institutional attributes that are related to these key aspects of well-being, according to the European University Association, there should be a culture of understanding and empathy. There should be fairness in decision and actions, transparency in decision-making, diversity and multiculturalism, and supporting as well. All of these key features are what constitutes well-being according to the European University Association. However, they identify some challenges because well-being is a complex concept. It's contextual, it's multidimensional, so it's kind of hard to grasp what well-being is. The environment and affecting well-being is also dynamic, as you are experiencing it now. Well-being 6 years ago is not what well-being is now. So that's also something you need to take into account. And responsibility in well-being is not anchored in every institutional culture. In some institution, it may be something that is not really trendy, something that we do not really speak about. So it's also quite hard in some cases. And last but not least, well-being required clear and transparent communication, which is also sometimes hard to implement. However, the European University Association has tried to develop some recommendations. So, for example, student and staff well-being should be clearly addressed in an institution's policy and strategy. Institutional leaders should also commit to engaging in regular, authentic, and open conversations. They should actually be role models. They should lead by example. Institutions should also prioritize investment, infrastructure, and resources to create an environment of well-being. Students should also be engaged along with staff as active and equal agent and partners in well-being. It's the idea to co-construct your well-being policy so that it suits everyone. Last, well-being needs to be quality assured, and that's the difficult part as well. But let's look at a concrete example from Armenia. It's an example from the French University in Armenia, which noticed that young soldiers face difficulty in returning to their studies after the war. And they actually had some key data in their diagnosis, because they had done an international study which reported that more than 55% of young men returning from military service experienced difficulties in reintegrated into the education system. And as a remedial action, they developed a reintegration program for the students who participated in the 2020 war. The objective was to help student soldiers to resume their studies and catch up with what they had missed when they returned. In terms of action, they have developed some private lessons, tutoring for this former soldier, along with psychological support and individual monitoring of student progress. At first, the university hired an external psychologist, but since 2003, it has recruited an in-house psychologist to be closer to the students and who offer anonymous psychological counseling services to enrolled students. They try to measure the impacts with the internal quality assurance unit. And so that was a strong start to the psychological support. Nearly 50 students met with a psychologist within the first 3 months of the program, which was quite positive, but it is a very small university. I mean, 150 students, most of them women, actually. So if we look at it according to the number of male students, that's quite a lot. And the students say that they were generally very satisfied with the additional courses and tutoring that were offered. However, they had suggesting adding specialized courses within this additional ones, such as French language courses, which is a requirement in this French university in Armenia. And usually, well, a foreign language, if you do not practice it, which of course they did not when they were at war, is what you lose the most. So that's why they actually wanted to add this specialized course, and the management team of the university has accepted and implemented their proposal. Let's look at the last feature we have today, post-conflict quality assurance, before we have a small break. In post-conflict quality assurance, you might need to take disability into account. And there was a study developed in Ireland, so of course not a conflict-affected area, but some of their recommendations are actually quite good. So their report is called Ableism in Academia, and ableism is the fact that you discriminate against people who are disabled. And their study shows that students with disabilities suffer from discrimination and the lack of support and supervision during their studies. So they actually adopted an intersectional approach to take into account all types of disability, whether visible or invisible. And they actually encourage the development of communities and association of students and researchers with disability so that they can support each other and exchange ideas. Of course, they want to have inclusive staff and inclusive infrastructure, a library access for all, interpreters for events, adaptation of online teaching for people with disability, and so on. They also advise to adapt the job description for recruitment, to adopt an inclusive language in it, to identify a contact person for disability-related questions and make sure there is no discrimination when recruiting people. And last but not least, they want to involve people with disabilities in decision-making. And they summarize this with one key sentence: nothing about us without us. And indeed, in post-conflict situations, there might be an increase of people with disability. And in that case, it's important to try to obtain reliable data and information about their disability. Also, I do know that it's quite complex. And it's important to take into account both visible and non-visible disability, as well as students with caring responsibilities who care for people who stay at home because of disability, and usually it's female who have to bear the brunt of those caring responsibilities. Therefore, measuring students' disability and improving their academic experience is key to avoid dropouts in a post-conflict situation. Here are just some examples of adaptation for disabled students. You can develop an institutional policy after consulting stakeholders. You can give more flexibility in the pace of study and exam. You can train the teacher in inclusive education as well, because it's not something natural. They have to know how to deal with that situation. You can set up tutoring, mentorship. You can ensure physical accessibility to the building. You can set up peer support group and partner also with some NGOs. I wanted to give you also an example from Kosovo regarding post-conflict peace building with quality assurance. Universities in post-conflict contexts face significant challenges, including damaged infrastructure, displaced population, economic hardships. However, quality assurance, when tailored to these unique environments, can help address these issues and foster recovery through stabilizing, reconstructing, state building, and peace-building efforts. In the case of Kosovo, it has undergone significant transformation since the end of the war in 1999 and its declaration of independence in 2008. This led to an extensive expansion of its higher education sector and the proliferation of both public and private institutions. However, the rapid growth presented specific challenges in developing, regulating, and consolidating the sector with the establishment of a quality culture. And some obstacles stem from the past, including the occupation and war from 1989 to 1999, and the lack of experience due to political and economic situation and transition. So in order to face with this situation, there were some remedial actions at the national level, some of which were related to quality assurance, including through the establishment of the Kosovo Accreditation Agency by 2004. It is the only agency in Kosovo responsible for the accreditation of higher education institutions and the study programs. It also benefited from international support, which we were talking previously, through capacity building and staff development. They received support from the US Embassy, from the Austrian Development Agency, or the Tempest Project from the European Commission. And this agency contributes to Kosovo's integration into the European higher education area. However, KAA, the agency, strived for a long time for compliance with the European standards and guidelines for quality. But its actions had a positive impact on Kosovo. Thanks to this agency, there was a decrease in the number of private higher education institutions, which decreased from 28 to 9 due to the regulations carried out by the agency and its accreditation activities. I had also included here some quotes from the review by ENCA, the National Association for Quality Assurance Agency, which reviewed in 2014 the Kosovo agency. And there were some quotes, very positive ones from stakeholders saying that the agency is the best thing that has happened to Kosovo since the war. It has a crucial role in harmonizing the system. Without KAA, we would never have been where we are now, showing that quality assurance is also very important for peace building in post-conflict affected area. And now, it's been actually just 2 days, the Kosovan agency is now registered in the European Quality Assurance Register for higher education, ECA. And after years of struggle, it is now compliant with the ESG. So that was all I had to tell you for this first part. As we are lagging a bit behind schedule, I suggest we have a shorter break. Maybe we could resume at 11:20. Would that be okay for everyone? Yeah, a 10-minute break, is that okay?
It's okay.
Я дуже прошу погодитися. Каву ви можете взяти з собою, повернутися і з кавою вже брати участь у продовженні заходу. І так, 11:20 можете залишатися на платформі, не виходити. І 11:20 ми всіх чекаємо. Далі буде інтерактивна частина нашої роботи. До зустрічі! Шановні колеги, прошу повертатися до роботи на заході. Також хочу попросити вас зареєструватися, хто не зареєструвався сьогодні. Зараз буде, уже є в чаті посилання для реєстрації з метою отримання сертифікату щодо участі у заході. Прошу це зробити. Дякую. Прошу, Софі.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's now start our little workshop. This will be our last activity of the day. So that's a workshop entitled How to Set Up Efficient Quality Assurance Systems Adapted to War and Post-War in Ukraine. And the aim of this peer learning workshop is to provide you with an opportunity to share your experiences of quality assurance of teaching and learning in emergency and crisis situations, and to learn from other participants as well. I will give you a link to a Google Doc document, which is divided into 5 main sections, each corresponding to one of the 5 areas of enhancement and quality assurance focus we studied today. You are therefore invited to complete the table by providing example of quality assurance and enhancement procedures that you have implemented or wish to develop. And you don't have to fill in all of the 5 areas of enhancement. You can, of course, just fill in one line of one table. And if you would like to provide feedback on enhancement areas that we have not discussed during the training session, you can also do so in the 6th section of the document, which is an open section. And this document will then be saved and sent to all participants to serve as a database or a toolbox of good practice that you could use later on. So here is the QR code for the Google Doc document. I will also copy paste the link in the chat, and I can give you a bit more than 10 minutes to write down your thoughts, and then we could open the floor and have some colleagues showing the example of good practices. Let me know if you have issues accessing the Google Doc. Yeah, that's good. I can see that more and more people are joining the Google Doc document. So feel free to write in any of the lines related to the area of enhancement that you want to focus on to share your feedback. If you can do it in English, that will be easier for me to follow, but otherwise, really don't worry. If you don't feel comfortable, you can do it in Ukrainian as well.
Софі, ще раз нагадайте, яку з таблиць мають заповнити учасники?
You can actually answer the table you want, depending. So yeah, you can answer the table you want depending on your topic of interest. If you are interested in student progression, you can fill in table 1. If you are interested by teaching delivery modes, you can fill in table 2 and so on.
Окей, дякую. Тобто, шановні учасники, будь ласка, нас зараз 120, понад 120 осіб тут долучилися, шановні освітяни. Давайте зробимо таку невеличку базу наших знань. Заповніть, принаймні, що ви встигнете за ці 10 хвилин. І нам буде легше готувати самері по заходу, коли ми побачимо деякі фідбеки від вас в цій таблиці. Я бачу, пані Олена має питання.
Так, я не можу нічого туди писати, там запитують права редагування, тобто таблицю ми можемо переглядати, але, ну, принаймні я зі свого робочого аккаунту, за яким я зареєстрована, не можу вносити ніяких змін.
It isn't, yeah,
We need access
edit
to the document, Sophie,
as editors.
as editors, right?
Yes, normally it's already in editing mode, so that's weird. I'm gonna try to refresh the document. All right, so yeah, normally everyone with the link should be able to edit it. If you can refresh your page, normally it should work.
А де ця таблиця? Підкажіть, будь ласка.
В чаті є посилання, Софі виклала на Google документ. От.
Yes, it works. After updating, it works.
Ну, шановні колеги, дуже прошу долучатися. Я бачу тільки поки що 39 учасників, тобто давайте хоча б половина долучиться, будь ласка. Працює вже.
Шановні колеги, у мене пропозиція розбитися на групи відповідно до кількості заявлених табличок, так, питань. Я думаю, так буде ефективніша робота в межах груп, ніж коли всі питання охоплювати відразу.
Пане Ігоре, ми планували такий формат, але забагато учасників, і у нас 10 хвилин. Тому на цьому етапі просто очікуємо від вас індивідуальних фідбеків по таблицям, де ви можете.
Я, до прикладу, не можу нічого
І
вносити.
там просто
ніяких
хтось ще
змін.
трохи порозбивав ці таблиці, вони розірвані, хтось кудись пододавав щось не туди. Там є проблеми технічні, хтось наробив.
Неможливо додати нічого зараз. Я
Так,
не
на
можу.
жаль, я теж не бачу те, що я вносила щось, ми тут попрацювали продуктивно.
Так, і я також щось вносила, ну тепер його не можу знайти, щоб продовжувати.
Yeah, indeed. I see that some tables have moved. So yeah, it's complex to have so many people for a workshop. But we have 15 minutes left before we wrap up. So I already saw some very interesting comments regarding the third mission in wartime, for example, or the role of AI. I don't know if any one of you would like to share his or her input early. And if so, please open your mic and feel free to share your feedback. Yeah, Lilia, would you like to? Yeah,
Так.
please go ahead.
Вітаю, шановні колеги, вітаю, пані Софія. Дуже дякую за презентацію. До речі, якщо дозволите, пані Софія, уточнити одне запитання, бо, знаєте, з вашого попереднього, ну, буквально хвилиночку, ви коли знайдете час, то, може, дасте такі відповідні роз'яснення. У вашій презентації, на початку її, в перекладі прозвучало от таке словосполучення – університетські стандарти. І от тут у нас у мене виникає питання, але в контексті української практики, яка формується. Університетські стандарти. Що це мається на увазі? Стандарти, які для себе розробляють університети, і вони ж їх потім реалізують? Чи це стандарти, які розробляють державні органи, і тоді ці стандарти однакові для всіх? Бо в перекладі прозвучало університетські стандарти, і що це таке? Ну, можливо, або зараз, або пізніше, а я щодо табличок. Як ви скажете, пані Софія?
It can be both, actually. University standards can be developed either at the national level by the Quality Assurance Agency, and from what I gather so far, NACA only accredits at the program level, not at the institutional. I mean, there was a pilot evaluation at the institutional level, but in this case, indeed, it's university standards that are developed nationally, and it's better when it's done in consultation with the universities. But universities themselves, at the institutional level, can also develop their own standards thanks to their internal quality assurance system. And in that case, it can either be something they adapt from the national level or from European or international best practice. And in that case, they develop their own standards for self-assessment purposes, and they try to adapt it to their own situation. So it's very fit for purpose because usually it targets some standards that reflect on quality indicators that the university wants to set for itself. So it can be both, yeah. Internal quality assurance, university level, or developed at a national level for universities.
Дуже дякую. А тепер, якщо дозволите, щодо нашої роботи, яку ми зараз робимо, і знову-таки, пов'язуючи з попередньою вашою презентацією, коли ви запитували нас, яких, можливо, ще стейкхолдерів можна залучати до оцінювання якості, власне, освіти і якості надання освітніх послуг, і як визначати в цьому контексті ще можна прогрес у студентів. Ну, як на мене, то от такий шлях можна було б запропонувати. Я думаю, що в багатьох закладах освіти він реалізується, але, якщо я не помиляю, ще не був озвучений. Значить, всі студенти ходять на практики, на різні практики. За результатами практик вони здають там певну звітну документацію, певний комплекс, да, цієї звітної документації. І от, можливо, в багатьох закладах освіти до цієї звітної документації додається ще і відгук керівника від бази практики. А хто це такий керівник від бази практики? Це отой роботодавець потенційний, правильно? Або стейкхолдер. І отут дуже важливо, щоб ці відгуки, вони не були, знаєте, такими формальними, а вони дійсно ґрунтувалися на такому критичному аналізі рівня знань, умінь, навичок, ну, загалом от компетентності, готовності і здатності студентів, да, уже виконувати певний функціонал. Тому от переведення, знаєте, спілкування з роботодавцями на такий от рівень відгуків, але не формальних, а ґрунтовних, це дуже важливо і для гарантів освітніх програм, для проєктних груп, для груп забезпечення. І це якраз канал ще один спілкування з роботодавцями, як дуже важливими стейкхолдерами ми сьогодні це розуміємо. Ну і потім за результатами практик можна проводити також певні, можна як завгодно назвати, зустрічі робочі, круглі столи, власне, з керівниками від баз практик, з отими роботодавцями, щоб ще раз їх почути. Знову-таки, в контексті адаптивності це можуть бути будь-які формати, змішані або онлайн повністю. Але головне, щоб почути потенційного роботодавця. Це, власне, якщо говорити про терміни або строки, да, коли чи як має закінчуватися ця робота чи тривати, то ця робота, як на мене, має бути просто постійною і безперервною, бо це спілкування чи не з основним стейкхолдером, роботодавцем. Да? Ну і очікування, як знаєте, результатами, врешті-решт, цієї співпраці, то це покращення і якості цієї конкретної освітньої програми, і процесу формування саме практичних умінь і навичок. Це, власне, те, що я хотіла записати в табличку, але в мене це також не вийшло. Дуже дякую. Дуже дякую, пані Софія.
Thank you very much. That's indeed very interesting to look at the labor market and how they can make sure that universities deliver good quality education. That's indeed relevant in all cases, whether stable countries or whether in war situations or post-conflict situations as well. So I have tried to clean a bit the table. There was indeed, I think someone by mistake took one table and put it in the footer. So I removed this and we now can see more clearly the table. There are lots of very interesting inputs. I don't know if anyone else wants to share what they have written, their good practice or their wish for future good practice that they would like to implement. Yes, Tatiana?
Yeah, I have shared the experience of implementing this admission. It's one more Erasmus Plus project we are participating in. And right now, simultaneously with this event, our students are participating in Hackathon. They are trying to suggest digital solutions for the communities, especially for relocated, for frontline communities. And on the one hand, it could seem that it isn't associated with the quality assurance, but in fact, it's real life. These are real life activities, and our participation in the project made our stronger in our cooperation with the communities and helps us to involve both students and teachers to solve some practical tasks. For them, IT students who study in IT programs, for them it's really a challenge and an opportunity to help communities and to practice. So it's only just one small example within that I wrote in the table, because I wrote a little bit more abstract, but there are a lot of practical things which help to make stronger practical training for students, and they make impact on professional development of teachers as well.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing your input. Indeed, the third mission is very important, also known as the societal impact or community engagements, and that's definitely a way to be useful for society, and at the same time to increase students' competencies and very practical competencies. So very important also in times of war. I guess it's a bit different. I mean, you have to adapt the activities, but it still works, and that's still an example of third mission. I see also some input regarding AI and how it can be used in Ukraine. There was also a question in the document on how we could, how teachers could actually avoid prevent students from using AI. And actually, if we look at the discussions at the European level at the moment, it's rather about incorporating AI in teaching and learning. You cannot really prevent students from doing something. They will do it either way. Same for the teachers. So you could try to see how you could incorporate AI in your teaching and learning activities, rather to show students what not to do with it, what we could do with it. So, for example, if you want to use AI later on, if students could use AI later on in their work, they need to know how to use it efficiently. They need to know the drawbacks of AI. So you could, for example, work on the prompts to help students write good prompts that would lead to good AI results. And at the same time, you could also, for example, write a prompt yourself. Look at the response generated by the AI and give this response to the students. Then you could ask the student to check what the AI said and whether it is accurate or not. Doing it myself, actually, I tried to do this exercise on the quality assurance topic, which is my field of expertise. And so I asked ChatGPT some comments. So I asked him, for example, to asked you to give me an overview of quality assurance in the European higher education area. And when looking at its response, I could definitely see that it was making some mistakes. So asking students to correct the mistakes of an AI is a way both to show them that AI is not 100% confident. I mean, you need to check what the AI does. And at the same time, it's a way for you to train your students and show them how they could use AI in a work environment while making sure they proofread it. I mean, you can't just use AI as such. You still need to proofread what has been done. We have a couple more minutes before we wrap up. So I don't know if anyone wants to share another feedback, another experience. I remember from the past session that Volodymyr and Marina also wanted to share their experience. So if you still have something to comment on, please feel free to do so. All right, so if there are no further questions, no comments, we could move on. So I will try to clean up a bit the Google Doc and I will leave it open and maybe send it in PDF format to Jana to make sure you also have it. And we can move on to the very last part. So wrapping up of these 2 half days. And let's first look at the key takeaways. So I just have one slide to summarize what we have been discussing here. So regarding the different aspects of teaching and learning and how they could be adapted for emergency and crisis situations through quality assurance, let's start off with student progression. We have seen that students' progression next to success can be followed and monitored with cohort analysis, which is a tool for quality assurance. When it comes to teaching delivery modes, we have delved into the examples of micro-credentials, which are, however, not always easy to implement, especially if we want them to be recognized. We have also looked at online learning. And so in terms of quality assurance, you can have either an institutional or program approach to the quality assurance of micro-credential. And you can also adapt your standards for quality assurance that is tailored to the online learning component. When it comes to student and staff well-being, you could set up psychological units for integration program, remedial courses, and so on. And in order to monitor the success of such endeavors, you could set up student satisfaction survey or use some quantitative indicators on the number of students following a reintegration program or their retention rates. Of course, regarding the international partnerships, you could look at some interesting features like the academic solidarity, the brokering partnerships, or the online academic partnerships. And when it comes to quality assurance, to make sure these features are relevant and successful, you could look at some evidence of university-led humanitarian or psychosocial outreach, especially the ones involving students, as it can be a way to monitor student-centered learning. You can also look at the impact of your partnership and do a course evaluation, especially for the courses that are delivered online and in partnership with foreign universities. Last but not least, as regards the post-conflict phase, you could look at the features related to the inclusivity and disability of higher education, at peace building and reconstruction. And in order to monitor these, you can have quality assurance processes and indicators that are cognizant of disabilities, that are inclusive. You can also try to set up a national reconstruction policy, including a national quality assurance policy. And this should be done in consultation with all of the stakeholders, students, quality assurance agency, higher education institutions, ministries, the labor market. Everyone should be included to think of this post-conflict and peace building reconstruction phase. So just before you move in, and just before we finish this this training and before you move to other activities, I invite you to fill in this post-training survey. The idea is for me to see what you have learned through this training activity and how, compared to yesterday, pre-training survey, you feel related to the goals of this training session. I will also copy-paste the Google Doc link in the chat if you want to answer it on your computer. But if you want to do it on your phone, you can just scan the QR code. And I'm pasting the document on
There
the
is
chat.
no access. Yes.
Access again, please.
Um, Okay, so you can refresh the link. Normally it should work now. So these are actually the same question as yesterday, and the objective is to see how your perspective has evolved since yesterday. Okay, we now have 4 answers. Right, numbers are rising, and once we have higher numbers, I will share the results as well and try to compare with yesterday. Okay, we now have 20 responses. Yesterday we had 88, so I'm not sure we'll be able to have 88 as well today, but let's try to increase the number. Okay, more than 30 answers. All right, we're reaching 40 answers. If some of you would like to have the QR code because it's easier on your phone, maybe I can share my screen again quickly before I present to you the results. All right, so let's look at the results and compare with yesterday. So we now have 45 responses. Yesterday we had a bit more, but we also had more participants, 88. And so before the training, there were still some people who were not confident at all in the four main goals of this training sessions. Most of you were slightly confident when it came to understanding the key concepts of quality assurance and adapting them. However, most of you were slightly confident when it came to developing strategy and developing evaluation tool. And now, it's good to see that we have more people who are highly confident in each of these objectives. No one feels no confident at all, so I guess the objective is met. You have been able to progress in either understanding, adapting the key concept of quality assurance, and developing tools and strategy with the bulk of people being mostly quite confident in all of these objectives, except in understanding the key concept of quality assurance, where now most of you are highly confident. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending this 2 half-days seminar. It has been a pleasure for me to be here with you. I have learned a lot from you, and I can only say that you are very impressive in being so resilient and so positive about quality assurance and how it can be a good leverage for education at the moment and in the future when we're constructing the country. So thank you very much. And if you have any further follow-up questions, please do not hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Ми, в свою чергу, Національний Erasmus Plus Office, також дуже дякуємо Софі. Для мене особисто і впевнена, що учасникам також було цікаво. Деякі відкриття я для себе зробила, хоча також обізнана з проблематикою забезпечення якості вищої освіти. Дуже дякую, Софії, за це. Систематизовано, чітко, ясно було представлено, і я сподіваюся, і ті учасники, які зараз активно брали участь в заході, і ті, хто дивився в Ютубі, і ті, хто подивиться в Ютубі відео, ознайомиться з презентаціями, які були представлені. Це буде на користь розвитку системи забезпечення якості, передусім інституційної. Тобто тут переважно викладачі, можливо, і адміністративний персонал також бере участь. Ми потім подивимося вже по результатам реєстрації. І сподіваюся, це вплине на політики і, можливо, розроблення стратегії розвитку і удосконалення викладання і навчання в контексті кризи, надзвичайних ситуацій. Ми дуже на це сподіваємося. І також дякую перекладачам, звісно, ми іноді дуже швидко говорили, вони намагалися це подолати і справлялися з цим. Звертаюся до учасників. Шановні колеги, ви отримаєте від нас також файл для того, щоб отримати від вас фідбек загалом по заходу, вже по організації заходу, по те, наскільки це було корисне, і інші питання там будуть. Невеличкий фідбек, звичайно, як завжди. І також, як ми говорили ще вчора, ви разом з фідбеком надали нам, можливо, якісь рекомендації у підсумку за цим заходом. Для того, щоб ми сформулювали такі рекомендації, узагальнили і, використовуючи, до речі, ту таблицю, яку ви сьогодні заповнювали, і зробили таке summary, яким би могли поділитися і з Національним агентством забезпечення якості, і з міністерством. Вони тут, але ми зробимо такий узагальнений документ, і це, думаю, буде дуже корисно, щоб наш захід спрацював на якісь позитивні зміни. Тому очікуємо від вас два фідбеки. Один заповнити таблицю, форму, звичайно, фідбеку. І друге, це ваші рекомендації, пропозиції, які би ви хотіли включити в це summary. Дуже дякую ще раз. І